Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Spread the Tech, a series of the Digital Inclusion Exchange podcast, co-hosted by the National Digital Inclusion Alliance and Digital Charlotte. This series is brought to you through a sponsorship with Verizon to help digital inclusion practitioners adjust to the new challenges brought on by COVID-19. During this episode, Angela Siefer, Executive Director of National Digital Inclusion Alliance, Bruce Clark, Executive Director of Digital Charlotte, and Andrew Wow, Director of Operations for Digital Charlotte, speak with Amy Huffman, the Research and Policy Specialist for the Broadband Infrastructure Office in North Carolina. During this interview, Angela, Andrew, and Bruce discuss with Amy how North Carolina has adjusted and risen to the challenges brought on by COVID-19. It is our intention that this conversation will help other states replicate some of the strategies North Carolina uses. We hope you enjoy.
Hello and welcome to the Digital Inclusion Exchange and our special Spread the Tech series in partnership with the National Digital Inclusion Alliance and Digital Charlotte, an initiative of the Knight School of Communication at Queen's University of Charlotte. Our hosts today are Angela Siefer of the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, Andrew Au of Digital Charlotte, and I am Bruce Clark of Digital Charlotte. Our guest today is Amy Huffman. Amy is a public servant and storyteller specialized in broadband, digital equity, tech-based economic development, and digital infrastructure. She has worked for a variety of types of public service organizations ranging from nonprofits to the School of Government at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Currently, Amy is the Research and Policy Specialist for the Broadband Infrastructure Office, housed in the North Carolina Office of Information and Technology Services. So, Amy, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here.
Yeah, so I'm straight to the theme today, jumping in a conversation here. Tell us how your office is responding to this crisis.
Sure. So like anyone, the first couple of weeks were spent scrambling a little bit, adjusting to our new norm, that sort of thing. But pretty quickly, we put in several different types of responses into play. So first, our Secretary Tracy Dokes, sent an email to all of North Carolina's IT vendors, including our internet service providers, asking them to provide services to North Carolinians and to submit those services that they intended to provide to us. And so we've been receiving those, and we use those to populate what we're calling our COVID response map. And so we have an interactive searchable map where any resident in North Carolina can plug in their address and see if they have access to one of the discount or low-cost offers that internet service providers are offering during this time. We wanted to make sure that North Carolinians had good information on what was available to them, and they didn't get frustrated by hearing about offers that were available to maybe someone in a different state or in a different county. And so we're continuing to populate that with offers as they come in. We also have information from the community anchor institutions across the state, like our libraries, schools, community colleges. Some of those folks are putting Wi-Fi in their parking lots and or around their buildings, and people can access internet at those. And so we're populating the map with those locations as well. So a resident can enter their address and see what local Wi-Fi hotspot is closest to them, that they can go and drive in and use the internet in their car. In addition, after that, Governor Cooper had a call with all of the North Carolina internet service providers pretty early on in the crisis in the first few weeks. And he asked them all to go above and beyond what they pledged to the FCC. And many of them stood up and actually have done that. One wireless internet service provider in Eastern North Carolina set up a dry Wi-Fi hotspot in their community. That didn't exist before Governor Cooper's call. So things like that are happening across the state. And since then, we've split our response has been further defined. We have what we're calling our immediate response. Then we're brainstorming and pulling together near-term solutions and then advocating for long-term solutions. So our immediate response are things like the map, the call with the providers, advocating for what has been long in the process with the Department of Transportation, a dig once policy, advocating to get that implemented now, things like that. We're also expediting our payments to our grant recipients. We have a grant program called the Growing Rural Economies with Access to Technology program. And that grant program provides funding to internet service providers to extend service in unserved areas. So we're expediting payments. And in the middle of this, we've also had our second round of applications come in from providers. And soon in the next couple of months, we'll be awarding $15 million to providers to extend service to unserved areas. So we're continuing that work. We're also working with partners like the Department of Health and Human Services to identify opportunities for investment on telehealth, including possible appropriation requests. And in the near term, we're looking at implementing other solutions as well, such as extending the FCC pledge terms for an additional 90 days, requesting the ISPs submit accurate coverage data to enable better identification of unserved households, creating negotiated agreements with fiber optic manufacturers and tower companies to provide low cost or low lease rates for providers awarded federal or GRATE grants. That's our grant program. We call it GRATE. And requesting federal emergency appropriation to include block grants to states to support the purchase of hotspot cellular-enabled laptops and equipment for Wi-Fi on buses. We've also been working with our Department of Information, or our Department of Public Information, which is our education department, and a couple other organizations like the North Carolina Business and Community Education group that sits in the governor's office to secure funding to put Wi-Fi on school buses and the school buses that are delivering meals to families across the state, so that when those meals are delivered, that students can log on and upload their homework or their work or download assignments and things of that nature. We've received commitments from AT&T, Google, and Duke Energy to provide funding for those for that equipment. And
hey, that's a lot of stuff there. Incredible. And I know you're still going. I imagine it's like a scroll, and there's just like you're just like unraveling all of these amazing things that are happening here. I think Angela might have had a question to jump in on a couple of those things.
I do, Amy. So the internet service providers have nationally and over all of their footprints provided some free and low cost offers. What have your conversations been like with those internet service providers? Are there any offers that are specific to North Carolina? Have you found that you've been able to encourage them to do a bit more?
Yes, the governor and our secretary have been working diligently to encourage them to do so in North Carolina. Some of our local providers have stepped up and done some things in their local territories. One thing that comes to mind is AT&T has offered to provide equipment and service to put on buses throughout the state. And they're donating that equipment for the buses, and they are donating the first 60 days of service. And so that's unique to North Carolina.
That's awesome. Can you talk a little bit about those smaller providers? I think of course, I mean, it's logical that the bigger providers, there's more awareness about the offers that they have. Can you talk a bit about what those offers look like and how they came to be?
Sure. So one provider is Eastern Carolina Broadband. They're a recipient of our GRATE grant and a newer wireless internet service provider in Eastern North Carolina. They're the one that has set up local Wi-Fi hotspots. So we've seen several do things like that. To my knowledge, to date, none have offered discount services, but I could have. I may not be as up to date on that information.
Yeah, that's really super to know. Thank you. And Amy, you before the crisis hit, your office and you in particular were doing a lot with local communities planning around digital inclusion, helping them figure out what they could do. I assume you're still having conversations with local communities. I don't know. Can you tell us, is any of that? I mean, it seems like planning right now is not something anybody's doing. It's more like do, not plan. So what are your conversations with those local communities? What do you see them doing?
Sure. So a lot of the planning has been put on hold. People are more in response mode and less in planning mode. And some of the initiatives that we had in the works prior to this are being altered because of that. For instance, we had a partnership with the Emerging Issues Forum out of NC State University, the Institute of Emerging Issues, excuse me. And they, a few months ago, really right before all this hit, announced a new partnership with us called Band NC, which would be a small grant program for communities that created digital inclusion plans. And then they'd get a little bit of funding for implementing those. We're now rethinking that and how to structure it in a way that is more responsive to the process or to what's going on right now. So that's still in the works, but it's now being reconsidered how to best implement that, whether it should be more response-based to the crisis and maybe have some planning happen later down the road that will still assist them with things like that. Our local communities are still working with our technical assistance team. We have developed a survey that we were developing long before this happened, that we still intend to push out to gather better data across the state on where internet access is and isn't and why people don't have it. So we plan to use that in partnership with communities. A couple of our counties are wanting to do that right now.
That's awesome. The Institute for Emerging Issues. So I was at that event that they held prior, and it was amazing. I was blown away that a university research center, essentially, active kind of center, had pulled together the issue of broadband and was not only addressing availability, but also addressing use of broadband. The side that talks about and addresses availability of it for everyone, affordability, digital skills, devices. And then after the crisis hit, they held a webinar then where they had someone they had a state rep and a national elected representative from two different parties. I really was also blown away by that. They are very much going at it in a bipartisan way, which I think is really essential right now. What are your thoughts on how you're seeing their role within the education and awareness building about the issue, around the issue?
The Institute?
The Institute, yeah.
Oh, they're a wonderful partner. They are a convening organization. That's what they thrive at.
Okay, thank you.
Really wonderful at convening conversations around difficult and important topics. And that's what they excel at and thrive at. And they have a lot of credibility in North Carolina because they're really smart, really awesome people, and have a long history of pushing forward topics that need to be pushed forward. And so their partnership has been wonderful throughout all of this, really, because they're really pulling people together in a way that's able to shine a light on this topic in ways that wasn't possible before.
That's fabulous. Bruce, did you want to jump in with a question?
I was going to go in a different direction, just so I can leave it here if you wanted to stay on this topic. But you mentioned, I'm just thinking about the sort of the acute needs that we're seeing, especially in the work we do with community, right? So people who can't go to their doctor, who need telehealth services, or students, obviously, with remote learning, and we know that not everybody in North Carolina, this is obviously applies to anywhere, not everybody has access. And so you mentioned the expediting the payments on the GREAT grant program. And so that is exciting to hear, as I know those things are challenging. I'm wondering what do we think our internet service providers or the infrastructure's ability to also expedite deployment? Are we seeing anything? Are you seeing anything? Will they be able to take that money and also expedite? Do we have enough people trained in this space to go out and install this infrastructure? What might you see the opportunities here in North Carolina around that?
Sure. I think with
six questions in one, sorry.
So yes, we believe the internet service providers that received our grants have the capacity to build out with the expedited payments at an expedited schedule. However, if we're going to pour, say, triple or quadruple or add basically millions and millions of more dollars into North Carolina to build out and try and build out in the next month or two or next year or two, we are going to need to add new employees to these local organizations. We're going to need more skilled people who are more skilled in, splicing fiber, digging trenches, that sort of thing. But right now, part of the agreement is that these companies can deliver on increasing service to North Carolinians. So we're confident that they can do that right now.
Amy, what do you, of all the things that you have been doing, if you had to give advice to another state in terms of, okay, capacity is limited, you may not have the staffing that North Carolina has been able to devote to it, what's the top one or two things that you would say, okay, these are the things, if you were really strapped on time, here's where I would concentrate your efforts? To address broadband in the home during the crisis?
Sure. I would start with talking to people, your peers and if they're a state broadband office, talking to your peers and other agencies. Obviously, each state's Department of Education is working towards making sure all of their school kids can receive equitable education at home right now. So they're, I think, a reasonable place to start. They would surely love some assistance. And there is a lot of funding coming down from the Department of Education that can be used, the federal Department of Education, that can be used to address, to supply technology and internet in the home. So working with them and advising them there, that's where I would start.
Okay, that's good advice. So my understanding of that funding that's coming from the CARES Act through the U.S. Department of Education is that it can be used to support the distance education that's occurring now, the distance learning that's occurring now, that it might be used on technology and it might not. So that there could be there's struggle might be the right word on how that money gets used. What are you hearing around that struggle, the kinds of ways that the money could get used?
Well, I think right now there's just a lot of unknowns, and there's a lot of different, just in the CARES Act for the Department of Education alone. I was on a call yesterday and it seems like there's 4 or 5 different pots of money, different ways you can go about receiving it, different things it can be used for. So I think right now people in North Carolina are still trying to figure all that out. What is what, and trying to figure out what it should be used for and what it should go towards.
Yeah, I think that's true in most states, that they're still trying to figure it out. Along inside that same CARES Act was money for in-student museum library services, also to be used for the issues we're discussing here today: internet access, devices, tech support. So are you having conversations with your state library about how that money will get dispersed?
We are, and that's another group that I'd recommend any broadband office work with, is your state library. We've had a long partnership with them. So these conversations about how the new funding should be used happen very naturally. We have a grant from IMLS already to create a homework gap toolkit for librarians so that they can be equipped to be leaders in closing the homework gap and really the digital divide in their communities. And we have a digital inclusion librarian who's funded from that grant that sits at the state library. So we're really thankful for the additional money from IMLS. We think North Carolina will receive around $900,000, a little over $900,000. And because we already have the digital inclusion librarian and we already have existing programs, we'll be able to deploy that pretty quickly and in ways that we hope are pretty impactful. And we'll have the support of a person at the state library who can help shepherd the local libraries as they implement new programs like hotspot lending or other things.
Yeah, that's really super. Have you adjusted that program? I'm sure you have adjusted it, right? How have you adjusted it because of the social distancing?
Sure. So I'll give a brief overview of the program and then it'll make more sense what we've done since. So the program, through the program, we hired a digital inclusion librarian who sits at the state library. We partnered with 4 different communities across the state. They're all rural. For North Carolinians, those are Robeson, Caswell, Hyde, and Mitchell counties. And we gave those libraries 35 hotspots apiece to check out to local middle school students. And so they partnered with a local middle school. They checked out the hotspots to the students for the full school year and then had digital literacy training once a month for the students and their parents. So that training has been put on hold. Obviously, all this hit and people can no longer come in person. The students do have the hotspots still. And with the libraries were able to check out, we had a few left over. We didn't have full registration in all the counties. So the libraries were able to check out the additional hotspots to other families and communities who needed them. The libraries are all closed right now, but they will soon be coming back to work. Some of them are going to the office here and there. Our digital inclusion librarian is creating written for the last couple lessons that the students weren't able to go through. She's creating written packets for them and we'll be mailing those to them. But they'll also, part of the program was if you completed all of the trainings, you received a free computer. We're still going to be delivering those. And so we were just setting up the logistics of that this past week. So they'll be getting those soon. They'll still get a certificate of completion. They'll get the materials that they missed, and the libraries can choose whether to let them keep the hotspots for the summer or not.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Amy, I had a question.
Mm-hmm.
Have you guys discussed, or has there been any discussion about doing some sort of virtual training now that there has been, I guess, devices being sent back home? Has there been any discussion of that? Or is there still kind of, we're trying to see what everyone else is doing? I know for us at Digital Charlotte, we're trying to figure out ourselves how we are going to adapt to everything being virtual.
Yeah. So I think what we'll end up doing is, I don't think for these participants we'll have a virtual training, but we will have, once they receive the computers, we'll have probably at least 2, maybe more times where they can call in or video in via Zoom and ask questions about the computers or any lasting questions that they have about how to, the things that they learned through the program. Most of them got through all but one of the workshops. So they're missing content from one workshop. But so we'll have give the opportunity that they can ask questions and that sort of thing. And then if the libraries want to do an online training, they're absolutely welcome to do that.
On that same topic, so we are in a very similar place and had a program that was 1 week away from finishing, and next week we're going to sit in the parking lot and hand out the devices one by one to residents at a senior facility, and providing them the hardware along with the skills that they already gained. But thinking about access to devices, especially now we've heard a lot of companies that were previously donating are needing those devices to because of all the remote work. And so where they might have had a surplus, they no longer have a surplus. And we know some opportunities in North Carolina around state surplus of equipment. Wondering about other states that might be thinking about this as well. But has there been any movement on loosening? I don't know if it's the right word, but the restrictions around these nonprofit refurbishers getting access to the state surplus?
Yes, the governor actually issued an executive order loosening up the state surplus computers for departments and education authorities to acquire. It did not, however, give authority to our device refurbishers to acquire them. They can still purchase them, but they can't necessarily be donated to them through the executive order. So we're working on fixing that. Our device refurbishers are Camden and E2D, Camden in the Triangle and E2D in Charlotte. So we're working on trying to figure out how to get them the devices because we at the Department of Information Technology don't have, well, I'm sure there are people in the Department of Information Technology who could rebuild computers. I'm not one of them. When I have volunteered at Camden and put together computers, but I have to follow the instructions. So we really need to get the computers to the people who know how to refurbish them. You don't need to dump a lot of broken computers on the school districts or the schools or the departments. So we're still trying to figure that out.
Do we know if any of the departments are yet taking advantage of that? And would they be using them to get into the hands of community members, or is it more get them back to use for their employees' remote work?
I do not know if anyone is taking advantage of that at this time. To my knowledge, a lot of departments don't have a huge surplus of computers to get rid of at this point. And I believe when I looked on State Surplus's website, there weren't that many. There was like 10 that they had. So I don't know that it's filling that gap for departments.
We should also note how lucky North Carolina is to have two nonprofit refurbishers who then get those computers into people's homes. Most states have 0.
Right.
And you guys have 2. Actually, now I think about it, I don't know if any other state has 2. I'd have to go do that research. Somebody will tell me I'm wrong, I'm sure. But I think it's a big deal that you have 2. And I think it says a lot to everything that North Carolina does have, that you do have Digital Charlotte, that you do have a strong broadband office, that you do have these refurbishers. You do have coalitions in multiple regions of North Carolina working on digital inclusion. You all have a lot going on.
On that note, great segue. Thinking about the coalition and the North Carolina Digital Equity and Inclusion Coalition. Amy, do you want to maybe just give a brief setup on that, but then also thinking about how that network of organizations and agencies are collaborating specifically during this time?
Yeah. So thank you. Yes, we have the North Carolina Digital Equity and Inclusion Collaborative. Because we had to be a little bit different, right? Yeah. So it's a group of digital inclusion leaders from across the state and different folks at different agencies and from some universities who work in digital inclusion and or their work is highly influenced or highly touches digital inclusion. For instance, the Department of Public Instruction, there's some folks there who are on our collaborative. So basically it's folks like Bruce and Andrew from across the state who really live and breathe this stuff. And we meet quarterly, and it's a place for groups to learn from each other, from us as the state to learn from them, and to hear about what they need to push their work forward and to create a more digitally equitable state, and for us to work on projects and things together. We have had a couple of really wonderful ideas come out of that group that we've been working towards. Like hosting a device day or a digital literacy day where we really highlight these issues and bring attention and awareness to them. So we're still hoping to do that at some point, although it feels like now every day is a device day or digital literacy day. Everybody is keenly aware of these issues now. But yeah, I've seen throughout this time, I've taken notes from folks like the NDIA and the NTIA, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, and convened. We had a meeting a couple weeks ago just for us to, convey what we're doing at the state to all of the members of the collaborative, and then also to hear from them what they need and they're working on in this time. I try to keep tabs on what everyone's doing and then connect dots between folks when they need to talk with each other. I've seen some, for instance, in Durham, a group put together a flyer to give to libraries about different resources that are available during this time. And I've seen a couple other things come out of the group.
So I'm also thinking about, there's a segment of our community that has interacted with state agencies and perhaps firsthand felt the frustration of maybe antiquated user experiences or things that have an opportunity to be refined, and now thinking about the thousands and thousands of people in our community and across the country who are having to apply for unemployment and issues with websites crashing and things like that. So are you seeing any immediate responses to improving digital literacy skills are one thing, but it's complicated when those systems are even more difficult. We had a conversation with a friend the other day who's in a master's program, and they had to apply for unemployment, and their experience was, I'm a master's student and this is incredibly difficult, even with my digital literacy skills. And so I'm just wondering if you're seeing or driving or participating in any conversations at the state about their digital tools and how this might be a really great opportunity to rethink the way that the customer and our communities experience these things.
I haven't been in those conversations, but that's good to hear that people are having struggles with that, because I can bring that back to folks. Another thing we have here in North Carolina is the Governor Cooper issued an executive order last year to create a task force of his state cabinet agencies to connect North Carolina. It's to update our state broadband plan and to really for the cabinet level agencies to take ownership of some of the recommendations that they can shepherd to increase digital equity through their agencies. The task force did have a meeting earlier this week, and I was able to hear updates from each of the departments. The Department of Commerce, as you can imagine, they've been inundated with unemployment requests, and so that's their main role and work right now. So that feedback's good to hear. I would encourage North Carolinians to provide that feedback to the state, and I can provide it to our colleagues.
Great. Well, we are coming towards the end of our time, and so I want to just make sure that we provide an opportunity for any maybe last questions, and then of course Amy will kind of give you an opportunity to wrap it up and put a bow on it. But Angela or Andrew, any kind of final questions?
I don't have anything. Again, huge kudos to Amy and all of North Carolina. You all are a model. So thank you for sharing your innovation and your awesomeness with us.
Andrew?
Nothing for myself. I mean, I guess I would make the general question of what did we not ask that you want to talk about, but that goes into the next point.
Yeah. Amy, what did we not ask you that you want to share?
Well, first, I want to thank Angela for just being a fearless leader, and a lot of the opportunities that are now available to us, like the IMLS funding, for digital inclusion and some of the money in the CARES Act is due to her and your leadership at NDIA. So thank you. You guys have been awesome during all of this and supporting, and I've heard a lot of really great ideas from the community that you've created and community that we've created here in the state. I've really used your model. I just copied and pasted it here. So thank you. And thanks to Bruce and Andrew too. Y'all are, again, another group that I consider as one of the greatest leaders in the country in this space, but particularly here in the state. And I lean a lot on your expertise and ideas. So thank you for all your work in Charlotte and for inspiring us to always do better and do more and to really close this divide. The last thing I'll say, I think, North Carolina is a leader because we have people like Bruce and Andrew throughout the state. And because I think, honestly, it's feels kind of quaint, but together we are better, and we, they push us to do more, and I learn from them. And then others throughout the state learn from them and are inspired. So I think that is why we are doing so well, is because we have so many wonderful people here who are really dedicated to closing the digital divide.
I don't know that we could have ended it any better. So, but again, Amy, thank you for your time. Andrew and Angela as our co-hosts. So thank you for joining the Digital Inclusion Exchange and our special Spread the Tech series in partnership between the National Digital Inclusion Alliance and Digital Charlotte, an initiative of the Knight School of Communication at Queen's University of Charlotte. Thanks.
Thank you.